the first month on Airbnb, I grossed over $3,000 with that property, with that little 2-1. And overall, my net was supposed to be as a long-term rental, $600 a month. As a short-term rental with both properties, I was netting over $2,000 my first month. And that was all I needed to know to say, I want to do that again.
What's up, Slick Talkers? In this episode, I sit down with Kyle Stanley and we go into his whole journey of how he bought his first property, flipped it, loved it, did it again, and got into short term rentals. And now is almost at 70 properties with a mixed portfolio of ownership, co hosting, and of course, arbitrage. And now, so the reason why this episode was super special for me was because I got to meet Kyle and his wife Gracie in Nashville when we attended the short-term rental wealth conference. And let's just say it was like we hit it off from the beginning, been friends forever, and got to know them really well, and just had this personal connection with Kyle, and wanted to talk to him about his journey. I think entrepreneurs in our space are super fascinating, especially when they get to a certain size and scale that we don't get to really see. We see a lot of the coaching stuff, we see a lot of his podcasts, or we see a lot of the success, but I want to hear the journey. What were the shifts? What were the challenges, the hurdles that had to be overcome in order to get to this point? And for anyone who's listening or watching, I think that if you can grab anything from any of these episodes and these interviews, that it would be that there's so many people that out there that have overcome so many challenges in their life. They may not be life or death and all these other things, but as humans, we have that inner core, that soul that calls and yearns for something. And when we find that passion and go for it and take off to be able to create this life that we can enjoy, and as you'll hear in this episode, it's about the journey. It's not about the destination. I just find it very enlightening and just super exciting as a podcaster and host, an entrepreneur myself. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you all again next week. You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. And I'm super excited to have Kyle Stanley, the man, the myth, the legend, the fearless investor, join me on the podcast today. Kyle, how are we doing, my man?
I'm good, man. I'm stoked to be on here with you. We've talked about it for a while. Finally doing the dang thing, though. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm super pumped. After getting to meet you and Gracie in Nashville at the STR Wealth Conference, I feel like we've become very close friends. And like you said on our podcast with your show, kind of feel like a brother connection coming. I'm like, yes. So
I
it's really
might look
excited.
like your dad, but I feel like a brother.
Hey, look like my dad, feel like a brother, as long as it's in the family, you know?
Yeah, there
Um,
you go.
Yeah, and so also got to connect while you were out here in Denver for a little bit, going off to a mastermind in Breckenridge, which looked awesome, by the way. Your guys' Instagram content was awesome around that. But before we get into all this stuff that you're currently doing, I want you to kind of give yourself an introduction to the audience from kind of how you even got into the industry. What's your background look like, and where does your story really begin?
Yeah, I went to college exactly for what I'm doing today. Not.
Okay.
Uh, so, who actually goes to college and does what they say they're going to do these days? I started off thinking I was going to be a sports anchor. I was actually a broadcast journalism major, and came out basically saying, "Hey, I'm going to be the next ESPN sports anchor, or I'm going to be the next play-by-play guy for the Chicago Cubs. I'm a huge Cubs fan." But found out very quickly that it's not quite the industry that I expected it to be, for a couple of reasons. One, your first job out of college, I'm getting paid $19,500, and I'm like, okay, that's not ideal, but I can try to make that work. And then you start meeting all these people in the industry, and a couple things in common. They're all very negative, very bitter. And it's really because it's a local TV station. It's kind of redheaded stepchild is what sports is all about.
Yeah.
We literally were the last thing on the show, so they were giving us very little credit, very little time, and so for that reason, you kind of feel like you're just a sore thumb, out there in this
Mhm.
industry. And for that reason as well, I was meeting a lot of guys who were sports anchors for 10, 15, 20 years and still making only 60 to $80,000 a year. And I was just like, man, like, I love sports. It's a passion, but just because it's a passion doesn't mean I have to get paid for it. Like, what if
Yeah.
I instead did something else, made enough money to then be able to go and go to any sporting event that I want? And that appealed to me a lot more. But I kind of got this idea of, well, if I don't want to take, if I don't want to take all these demands from other people, I think what we call that as an entrepreneur, I should start my own business, right? And
Mhm.
so I started a business. That was also in the sports industry, but helping athletes get recruited to play in college, which felt like it was, a little more fulfilling because I was helping people. But I was 23 years old when I started that, and didn't have a mentor, didn't understand the importance of a mentor, just kind of figured I'll get the bumps and bruises along the way. I'll figure it out. And then eventually be able to have a successful business. But unintentionally, I created a very low ceiling in that business, followed by a lot of work and a lot of man hours, and without the ability to scale it. And so, but you have all this pride and you have all this ego, right? When you start a business and you leave something that everyone thinks you're really good at, everyone could
Mhm.
not believe that I left the news industry to start a business. So I wanted to prove everyone wrong. I wanted to prove them wrong that like, hey, I should start a business. I should be an entrepreneur. And so I held on to that dream a little bit too long. I should have seen the writing on the wall with that business and changed things or shut it down a little bit sooner than I did. But um, after 6 years, finally shut it down, got into multi-level marketing, which I'm really still grateful for today because it helped me to really start looking at working on myself, and the understanding of education and mentorship is so vital to your success. And did that for a little bit. And then eventually, when my dad became ill with bone cancer, I did a really hard look at my life and said, if is anything that I'm doing truly leading towards passive income and the ability to not only be a provider for my family, my future family, but also be there with my time? And the answer really was no. And the only thing I could really think of that would make the most sense was real estate. So I started
Mhm.
flipping houses with the idea of I'll make a bunch of money, I'll go buy some rentals. And that second flip that I did ended up turning into a short term rental because I just wanted to see how it would go. And here we are 65 plus properties later, 3 years later, and most of them we don't even own. So it's it's
Yeah.
kind of wild. But that journey just, I kind of went where the need was at that point, and that's where it's led me.
For sure. And before we go into your Airbnb, your short-term rental real estate side of things, you kind of mentioned that you kind of gave yourself a ceiling with your first business, from helping the college athletes. Can you explain more or less like what was the model for what you guys were doing, and what roadblock ended up having to be hit for you to realize that you guys were kind of capping yourself out at potential revenue and
Yeah.
just everything else that you're like, because obviously this business that you're in now is so different. You're making incredibly great income from passive rental. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just
Well,
curious on this.
I think the biggest thing, and it's unintentional because when you're young, I'm 23 years old, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I just want clients. I just want to get paid, and I just want to prove that I can actually do what I say I'm going to do. A lot of people start asking you, well, okay, you do video, but do you also make a profile? Do you also connect with college coaches? And so my answer was, well, yeah, we can do that, and then I had to go figure out how to do that. And then instead of just staying in my lane, I was trying to go to the right and the left and stay in and trying. I was spreading myself way too thin, and I didn't know how to charge for that, and I didn't realize the amount of hours. And so I think that all came from not having a clear vision of where we wanted to go with the business. Now today I understand what it means to be clear in your vision. Like I know I was just talking to someone about this the other day. Like I get opportunities sent my way all the time. I know if I was 23 years old again, I'd be like, yeah, let's do it because I didn't have that end goal in mind. But now today it's like, okay, if I do that thing, here's the amount of time it's gonna take me. And now it's like, well, I that's not my goal though. My goal is not to make more money. My goal is to have more time freedom. And so I know what to say yes to and what to say no to because I know what the end goal is. And I just didn't have an end goal in mind when I first started that business. I just wanted to make money. And I always say if you aim big, you're gonna miss big. And I missed big on that. Now I'm aiming small. And if I miss small, then I'm still in the same lane.
Do you think entrepreneurs can learn that without experiencing it? Or do you think we have to experience it in order to actually learn that lesson?
Yeah, I mean, I think entrepreneurs by design are pretty stubborn, right? That's the whole reason why we don't want to take orders from other people. So if we, we'll tell you all day long, right? We want to learn from your mistakes because we don't want to make the same mistakes. But if we didn't come up with that idea, most entrepreneurs are like, well, it just didn't work for them because they probably didn't do it right. And then we go and we do it. We're like, oh wait, that really just didn't work. So um, I think if you can just check the ego at the door and really work on aligning yourself with someone that and like make sure you're with the right person too, because that's when it gets gray. Like if I want to have you as a mentor, Will, and you don't know anything about YouTube, but you know everything about podcasts, and then I'm probably not going to take that YouTube advice from you, right? And now I got to start figuring things out on my own. Whereas like if I know I only want podcast help, I'm going to go to you and I don't have to figure out like, okay, is his advice good or not? So understand who your mentor is. And it's okay to have multiple mentors. I have mentors in my life who are business, who are real estate related, who are family, faith, all over the place. I have different mentors. And I just decide that they become my mentors because I know that where they are in their life and for that one thing that I need help with, that's where I want to be.
For sure. No, I love that. And you talked about the multi-level marketing stuff, and that's where you really learned the mentorship, the coaching type mentality. Was there anything in particular for you from coming from like the sports broadcasting space to then getting into your real estate and flipping and now Airbnb short-term rentals? What were, I guess, some bigger mindset shifts that you had to make from lessons that you either learned from your multi-level marketing side or just even mentors that you've met along the way? Was there any mindset shifts you had to do in order to get to where you are?
Yeah, I had to start reading again. To be honest,
Really?
like I wasn't feeding my mind with anything. It's so true too. What you're the average of the five people that you spend the most time with. I'd take it one step further and just say, you're the average of what you're listening to on a daily basis, whether that's a person or radio or music or a podcast or whatever. Um, I hadn't voluntarily read a book since I was gosh, I mean, 9, 10 years old. And here I was jumping into multi-level marketing at 24 years old. And everyone was like, read this book and do this and listen to this podcast. And I was just like, I don't have time for that. And then
Yeah,
I started to realize every single person that was where I wanted to be was reading books. And I was like, "Okay, I guess I'll re" and just by doing that, by diving in, I realized, like, I actually had a passion for self-development and bettering myself, and for that reason, I was really interested in reading these books. I just didn't know until I cracked it open.
mm,
Um, so that's really translated till to today. I don't read books anymore because 'cause I'm way too slow of a reader. I listen to them. I go into, the gym, I pop in Audible, and now today, like, one of the books I'm reading is called Necessary Endings, and I'm just, that's where my, like, ideas are happening too. I hear something, and I'm like, "Here how can I implement that in my life right now?" And that was a huge, growth moment for me that, I really still enjoy today.
how do you, when you have an idea pop up like that, when you're at the gym, listening to an audible, listening to a podcast, how do you track it without forgetting? Like, how do you make sure that when once you go shower, shave, get dressed, get ready for the day, eat, do whatever your stuff is before you sit down and work or like do anything? How do you track it? Do you put it down into your phone? Do you make a mental note? Like, how do you make sure you don't forget that? That's my biggest thing. Is like if I'm on the gym or on the treadmill at the gym and I'm listening to something, I'm like, oh, that's really good. If I don't write that
Yeah.
down, it's probably gone
Yeah,
for a while.
so I have 2 phones,
Uh,
and one is a personal phone, one is a business phone. So if it's something that's like, "Hey, I can implement this today," I'll just text it to my other phone so that it pops up
Mm.
as a notification. And then when I get back, like I'll take my personal phone to the gym so that I'm not distracted by work. And then when I get back to my desk the next morning, there's that notification of like, oh, whatever it is, read this book or, jot down your 10 goals for the next 90 days, whatever that is, I can accomplish that pretty quickly. But if it's like a project, then I'm going to email it to myself and I mark it in my email as like personal notes. And once every month or so, I'm going into my personal notes folder in my email and saying, okay, what's some of the things that I haven't really implemented that I had as ideas that I'd like to be able to do. Another thing that really has changed my life has been, I call it my decision quadrant. So a lot of you probably do this or have heard of this, but it when you actually implement it, it will help you move the needle more in your business than anything that I've done to date. And it's just quadrant. So you make a T or a plus sign on your paper, or I have it on my whiteboard over here in my office. The top, you go important. Top right, not important. Um, on the other side, vertically, you go urgent, and then on the bottom, not urgent. So you have 4 quadrants. One is important and urgent. The other one is important but not urgent. The other one's urgent but not important. And the other one is not important and not urgent. Right. And so
Mm.
now I can decide, hey, this is something that if it's in the important and urgent quadrant, I have to get that done this week. So I reset this thing every single Sunday, so that I know Monday what's my to dos for that week. And so if I have that idea at the gym, right, then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I need to do that. It's going to go in the important and urgent. But if I am like, hey, this is a cool project, like right now I'm thinking, hey, it'd be nice to write a book, so that's in my not important and not urgent section. It's just kind of a passion project that would be really fun to do, but it's still there and it's in front of me and it's reminding me every week that I don't take action on it, that it's like, oh, you haven't done anything with this. You probably should do something about that. And you'll also find that they move boxes, right? Because what was
Yeah.
not urgent last week but was important is now both urgent and important this week. And so that's honestly been a game changer for how I schedule my day and how I schedule my weeks.
I'm glad that I have another Sunday friend who does stuff on Sunday because I'm the same way, like religiously. Sunday morning is my time, coffee, planning, organizing. I don't do the quadrant on a whiteboard, but I do it within Asana. I have like a tagging system. And
Sweet.
so projects or tasks move as they become either important and urgent or urgent and not important type, stuff. Um, but no, it's really cool. I like the, 2 phone situation. You're one of the few people that I know who has 2 phones. I always, like, think about it, like, should I separate my personal and business? Probably should, but that's always cool.
I
Uh,
mean, that was the biggest if I can give you a life hack, Will, that's the biggest life hack I've ever done. I mean, when when we have our phone in our pocket, right, especially as entrepreneurs, even if that thing is on do not disturb mode, right? We still have to check the time every once in a while. We still have to see, did I miss any texts? And what happens? We open up our phone and we see all these notifications and we can't help but wonder, even if it was just a voicemail from mom or from, that one friend that you haven't talked to in 2 years, even though you don't listen to it or read it, it's now in your mind and it's taking up space in your mind. My personal phone does not give me an opportunity to do that. The top 20 people in my life have that phone number. If it's an emergency, they call me. It does not have any sort of social media, so I can't get notifications on things that are meaningless. It allows me to be fully present. And I mean, that's and but the same point, I have to create the boundaries of when do I put down that work
yeah,
phone, well, so that I know, okay, after 5 p.m. and on Saturdays and Sundays, I'm not touching that work phone. Maybe on Saturday or Sunday just to check in, maybe once in the middle of the day, but that's about it.
yeah. No, I love that. That's super, super important. I think I'm gonna take note, go down to AT&T and T and start talking to them about getting a business line or something.
There you
I
go.
love that. So, okay, let's get into the flipping side. So you get into flipping, you turn your second rental in or your second property into a rental
Mhm.
just to test the waters. What were the results of that test?
Oh, that was awesome. So, most of my business today has still been built by relationships. So just to kind of tell you how I got that deal, when I first started flipping, I knew I did not want to be knocking on doors. I didn't want to be going and doing cold calling. Like that was just not the business that I wanted to develop. I wanted to have deals coming to me, and the easiest way to do that was to provide value to other people who I knew could eventually bring me deals. So that's why I actually started my podcast and YouTube channel. Decided to do that right after my first flip because I was like, hey, if I can create relationships and add value to someone like, a couple friends of mine, one, his name is John. He's here in town. He does close to $1 million of flips every year. If he has a deal that he doesn't want and it doesn't have enough meat on the bones, I probably want that because I don't have as many deals as he does coming in. So I'm going to invite him on my podcast, bring him a bunch of value. And, oh, by the way, can you bring me a deal if it doesn't look like it's good for you? That's kind of how I built my business. So the second deal I ever did was with a realtor. She was going to list it, but then she said, "Well, wait, I might be able to expedite this." She called me up. I walked the property, offered 165 on it, got the offer accepted. It had a main house, and which was a 3-2, and then this little like studio, which really had been used as a warehouse for the last 20 years. And I decided, hey, let's turn this into a 2 bedroom. It was big enough to turn into a 2 bedroom and have two properties on it. So we put 55,000 into the rehab and we burred the property. If you don't know what a burr is, it means buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat. Essentially, you can put all this money into a property and then add value and then refinance it, and the ability to be able to get all your money back if you do the numbers right. And that's what I did on this one. So I put $220,000 into the deal with other people's money. Plus furniture was about another $20,000, so call it $40,000. So I'm all in at 240. I refinanced and that was at 315 and I got 75%. I can't remember because this was 2 years ago times 0.75. What are the numbers on that? So I got 236 back. So I literally was $4,000 of my own money into this deal and had a tenant in the main house, and then I did the little studio that we turned into a 2-1 into an Airbnb. If I had had that as a regular rental, it would be doing about $800 to $900 a month. The first month on Airbnb, I grossed over $3,000 with that property, with that little 2-1. And so, overall, my net was supposed to be as a long-term rental, $600 a month. As a short-term rental with both properties, I was netting over $2,000 my first month. And that was all I needed to know to say, I want to do that again.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
I'm super thankful that you say the term netting instead of talking about gross or cash flow, because I think cash flow and gross are great. But I think as entrepreneurs, especially when we're talking about lifestyle businesses like short-term rentals, that really allow people to enhance their lifestyle and kind of step away from a 9 to 5 or
Yeah.
whatever type of nightmare that they catch themselves in. Um, the net is really important. Like after costs, after your mortgage, after everything, like after you pay the housekeeping team or whatever the situation is, like that's the real number that I like to know. So I'm glad you said that. So you saw that go through. I'm curious to hear on kind of how your implementation was when it came to like smart locks. Did you do smart locks right out the gate? Did you have like in-person check-in? Was your guidebook, piece of paper that was laminated and a binder? Like what did it look like when you first
Yeah.
got
No,
into
I
it?
all the wrong things in the beginning. I don't think we started using keyless entries until property number 7.
Okay.
Like I had keys and a lockbox.
Yeah.
Um, and you have enough people that walk away from the property with the key in their pocket by accident, and for that to happen, and now you're like, okay, I need to fix this. Um, I think we had a guidebook, a physical guidebook there. Um, I just was figuring it out, like I had no idea. I bought a course, which was great. And that course also taught me how to arbitrage. That was my next step. Um, but I mean, just from an operations standpoint, and that's the thing I talk about a lot with my students is you get so many people that want to have everything perfect before they open up their first operation, and
Mhm.
that's not what it's about. It's literally just about getting the dang thing done, ready, fire, aim. And if you can do that, and you can figure out what works, what doesn't work, what is a great path and what's not so great, then you can make those decisions and learn from that. And yes, I really wish I would have had a better mentor, a better coach to show me like, hey, get a keyless entry, padlock right from the get go. I wish I would have had that, but I didn't. But I figured it out, and I don't think it held me back too much from moving and scaling my business.
Yeah, and say, being at 65 properties now, I don't think that really slowed you down very much. 'Cause
Yeah.
yeah, I think I told you when we were talking, it's like I only learned about keyless entry because it was a problem for me as a hotel manager when I thought about if you remove the front desk, like who's gonna check anybody in? They can't make their own keys, right? So it's gotta be like
Right.
a keypad. And so for yeah, that's very interesting. And now I want to know, so you talked about arbitrage versus co-hosting versus owning. Do you have a mix of all three in your portfolio, or are you sticking with two? Because I also read in your bio that you really didn't take this, short-term rental Airbnb business serious until about 2019. And now, obviously we all know what happened in 2020. So I'm kind of curious, kind of walk us through that journey of your portfolio mix and just like once things really started having a huge trajectory for you.
Yeah, well, I'll reverse engineer it for you. So start with what it
Sure.
looks like now. We have I wanna say, if we're gonna be completely accurate, I wanna say we're like 67, 68 properties.
Okay.
So let's just round it up to 70, and call 10. We just got rid of 2 arbitrages and added 5. I'm at like 10 arbitrages, 8 doors that I own. And so what does that leave? About 52 for co-hosting, right around there. That's about the as close as I can get for the numbers right now. I started off, I owned the first one, and then I started Googling, "Hey, how can I do that again?" Found out about the arbitrage model and was like, "Whoa, wait, wait, this sounds too good to be true." Literally picked up the phone, called Airbnb and said, "Hey, um, do I need a deed to, like, put the house on Airbnb?" "No, you don't need that." "So I could list someone else's house?" "Yeah, you can do that." "Okay. How many listings will you let me have?" "As many as you want." "Okay. Just wanted to make sure." So, once I heard that, I was like, "Yes" to arbitrage. Went and got a one-bedroom, one-bath arbitrage apartment here in Fresno. Um, Saw it worked, and the funny thing to me, Will, was I still, even with that, I was like, "Nah, I still wanna own," because I had gotten so deep into real estate. The benefit of owning an asset was just so ingrained into my mind, and it still is the most beneficial, but what I didn't measure at that time was, what is the goal? The goal was to replace a full-time income, and all I needed was about 6 or $7,000 a month to do that. So, I had a little bit of cash. I bought 2 properties right after that. So I had 4 now, 1 arbitrage, 3 owned, but I wasn't at 6 to $7,000 a month. I was close, but now I was out of cash and I was like, I'm almost at my goal. So I guess this really does make sense. I guess I do need to arbitrage more. So I was kind of forced into going back to the arbitrage model. Got another 2 apartments, was able to get to that 7 to $8,000 a month now with 6 properties. And I reached that goal and I was like, cool, I'm good. But here was the thing, man, is that, like, I didn't wanna talk about it. I didn't wanna tell anyone about the goal
Yeah.
that I had, you know? I had all these guys around me who owned 40 rentals and were bragging about making $5,000 of passive income with 40 rentals, and I was like, "I'm doing that with, like, 5 Airbnbs,
Yeah.
like, that's nothing."
Yeah.
So, I didn't wanna tell anyone, and then, I was at a meetup group, and this guy who was leading the meetup group, making millions of dollars a year, he said, you got to have an abundance mindset. You got to be telling people everything you're doing. If you don't tell everyone what you're doing, you don't have a business, and you need to expect nothing in return and just trust the process and it'll return tenfold if you just go out and give value for free. And all the voices inside, right? No, that's just for him. That just sounds good. He's just saying that. He just wants more deals. That's why he wants people bringing him deals. And one day I was just like, maybe I need to do that. So I did. I started talking about my podcast. That opened up the stream to be able to start doing coaching. Never thought I'd be doing that. And then people in my town who were listening to my podcast and watching my YouTube channel were like, hey, if I give you a short-term rental, if I give you a house, will you manage it for me and just charge me a percentage? And I was like, well, I don't think that that's a thing, but I'll take a look. And I did the numbers. I was like, wow, I can make $1,000. They can make $1,000. I've got no money involved in this. This sounds pretty cool. And at that point, that was February of 2020. So we got 2 co-hosting deals ready to take on the world, and then COVID hit. Well, we took about half of our Airbnbs, put them as long-term rentals, month-to-month rentals during COVID because we were just scared that,
Yeah.
we were gonna have no occupancy. But the 4 that we kept on were killing it still, 90% occupancy with great rates. And I was like, "What's going on here?" And
Yeah.
abundancy mindset, right? I had to stick to that new mindset that I developed and needed to tell people like, yeah, it's still going really well. And with the fear again, still being, well, what if they go and buy properties and do it? And now I'm going to be saturated. Well, what ended up happening was everyone and their mom who was like, if COVID, if short-term rentals survive COVID, then it'll survive anything. And within 4 months, we added 18 properties right there with other people's properties. So literally went from, having a full-time income replaced to life-changing income, what felt like overnight. And
Yeah.
now today, the majority since then, the 40 that we've added since then have mainly been co-hosting with a splash of arbitrage and ownership as well.
It's incredible. I love the story, and I love how it just kinda naturally falls into place for you as you're like, "Oh, I don't think that's the thing. I'm gonna Google it, find out it's the thing." You're like, "All right, let's keep going." And I wanna talk about, like, the abundance mindset part really quick because, like, obviously, you have the title Fearless Kyle, Fearless Investor. Um, where was this fearless part come in, and how do you, because like as you're hearing this abundance mindset part, you even said like the fear of like, oh, he's just saying that he wants deals, there's no way it's actually working. Like what did you have to do in order to actually turn that switch on to actually work and have that fearless abundant mindset, um outside of just being like, oh, I replaced my income? Like, to me, that's actually even been the most scary thing, right? Like when I gave up my hotel management job to go into entrepreneurship for the first time
Mhm.
fully, that was even more scary than imagining being at my job for another 3 or 5 years
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, it's so the way that we started the Fearless Investor, it started out as Fearless Flipping.
Mhm.
And growing up, my mom, one of the themes that she had was, have the heart of a lion, but the caring, the kindness, the gentleness of a lamb. And so I was thinking to myself, well, investing, like that's the heart of the lion right there. So I was like, what's a good
Mm.
word that goes with a lion? And if you're able to see on my video right now, right behind my left shoulder here,
Yeah.
you can see kind of the lion out of the house there. Um fear, like fearless. Like, yeah, lions are fearless. And, the alliteration of flipping, I was like, yeah, fearless flipping. That sounds awesome. And then when I just realized, hey, not really flipping anymore. So what am I really doing? I'm just working on being the best investor I can on a daily basis. So that's why we turned it over to that. But I think the important thing to know is that fear is always going to be there. It's what you do with the fear.
Mm.
So one of my favorite quotes is fear will push you until vision pulls you. So most of the time, fear pushes us to a certain extent, right? Like we're afraid that we're going to get kicked out of our house, so we pay the rent, right? But then we don't even have enough money to, go on the vacation. So at that point, why don't we have the money to go on the vacations? Because we don't have a vision that's pulling us in that direction. We only have enough fear to take care of the things that mean the most to us, just so we can keep the lights on. So, so I think a and I talk to people on a daily basis, the fear that they have of making the wrong move or bringing someone in, promising them something like, it's so easy in Airbnb, right? Like, I think, Mr. or Mrs. Owner, that if I coast for you, I'll make you this amount of money, but I'm too scared to actually even promise that to you. So I'm just not going to pursue it at all. I think that comes from a place of not knowing what you even want, where your vision is
Mm.
going. Right. And so, um, you know, it's a lot more of just it starts as fear, but it really depends on what you're going to be doing with that fear from there. What was the second part of your question?
Basically, the overcoming of that mindset for you into, abundance mindset and just covering, obviously, I think there's a lot. I like what you just said because a lot of times, I forget if it's a quote by someone pretty famous and popular, but pretty much saying like whenever with every action there's a reaction, right? So fear would
Mhm.
be the action, and the reaction on how we handle that fear is
Yeah,
going to be the outcome of, you know, our our situation, whether it's business, life, personal, whatever.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So
That opposite or or equal reaction, right? Like we're either
Yeah,
going
yeah,
to match the fear and let it take over us, or we're going to do the exact opposite and let it motivate us, right?
for sure.
Uh,
100%.
well, the biggest thing for me goes back to like what you asked me. Can you really go back and say like, hey, if an entrepreneur was right in front of you and had the answers, that you would take their advice and not
Yeah,
go and try to learn it the hard way. I think I was mature enough at that age. I was 31, 32 years old to say, hey, whatever I've been doing, it hasn't been working. So this guy in front of me, who's only about 5 years older than me and is making millions of dollars every year, he's probably figured something out. Maybe it's time for me to start listening. And no matter how uncomfortable it felt, no matter how like fearful I was just like, man, if it's working for this guy and he truly says just do it, don't expect anything in return, and it'll naturally come back tenfold. I just got to trust that process. And the other part of it too was it wasn't just him; it was other successful people in that room, and also within this tight knit community of real estate investors here in the Central Valley. They all agreed. They all said every time that I had gone out there and didn't ask for anything in return, I was blown away with what happened. And so I had enough positive reviews of what I was about to try to really give it a shot. And so it was just kind of honestly, I would say it was just trying enough on my own to now say, hey, my way is not working. I got to try someone else's way.
for sure. And I want to bring up a conversation. This is a little bit more on the personal level. So please let me know if you want me to scratch this out. But we had this conversation in Nashville because you recently got married.
Yeah.
Beautiful wife, Gracie. Love her to death as well as got to meet you guys both in Nashville. Just had a great time. How did this all apply to now your personal relationships when it comes to like
Mm.
getting into now like a marriage, like going from completely being single, business oriented to then boom, I'm going to focus on starting a family, having a partner, all that.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I could go so many different ways with this. I think
Because we
I
had
think
a
the
chat
big
about this. I remember this at the
yeah.
Jason Aldean's roof bar. Like we were talking a little bit about like the shift of like, dude, I had to like step back for a second. There was a moment, right? Like, and I as a single man, you know, I'm not in that position. I'm full
Yeah.
focus, steam ahead. So hearing that, I was like something that I actually, still think about. Like, damn, like that
Yeah.
was that was
Well,
a good conversation.
we also had a couple drinks that night, so I may not be able to say it word for word, but I
Yeah,
mean, it if I'm thinking about the same conversation, I think the big thing for me was I thought I needed to have everything in my life in a line before I actually met or dedicated, my life to someone else.
yeah,
Um, and and what I found out is that like you're never going to be the best version of yourself, and if you do, you've never reached where you want to go anyway. So if you're not always trying to get better, like I think I just always was thinking to myself, there's going to be a better version of me. So for that reason, like I don't know that I'm ready to settle down. And then when I finally was just like one day, like, hey, like this has just been an excuse. This has been just fear. This has been me not thinking that I'm good enough for someone else. And it comes down to the fact that like when you find the right person that understands your flaws, accepts your flaws, and is going to, work through those together with you and accepts their own flaws too. Like that's the beautiful thing. And I think that's the biggest thing too, if you're going to connect it with, being an entrepreneur, is that you're never going to have everything figured out before you go and start that business. You're going to figure it out along the way. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to even get the advice that is the right advice that you're going to ignore, or that you are going to do it. You're just not going to do it the same way that it was advised to you, and you're going to still make those mistakes. But it's the fact that you just do it, and you accept that you're never going to arrive. So if you're waiting to arrive at a certain point, it's just never going to get there. And
mm,
and I think that was, I don't know, was that kind of the
yeah,
okay, yeah,
yeah,
I thought that's what
yeah.
we talked about, yeah.
Right on the money. Yeah, we may have had a few drinks, but it's still something I remember clearly, sober and non-sober. I'm curious because you said that thought of like I'm not good enough, for this person. I can't be accepted for my flaws. Like I'm never ready for that kind of vulnerability. Do you think that's like embedded in us through social media and the way like current like state of social, society is, or is there something that like usually gets embedded in us in that like growing up, or where do you think that really stems from?
I think you make a good point just in regards to social media. And I think that that's something that probably impacts people today that it would not have impacted them 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
100%.
But I think as entrepreneurs, that's kind of ingrained in us because we're always trying to be the best. And when you're trying to be the best, you're always in this comparison game just naturally. Like I can tell you anytime I've gone out and played a sport that is an individual sport, I'm hard on myself, but because I'm not letting anyone down. I'm not a part of a team, right? Like if I just go and shoot some hoops on my own, if I go play around a golf on my own, I can get mad at myself and be competitive with myself. But as soon as I get on a baseball field and I get that ball hit to me and I miss it, I feel like I just let everyone down. And now it's like the pressure I put on myself plus the imaginary pressure that I'm now putting on myself from 9 different people who are staring me on the field, plus all the people in the stands, right? And so I think that transfers over to entrepreneurship is just there's eyes always on you. And especially like, right, if you have a podcast like we do, there's, I just had a scammer that has taken over like my
Yeah.
life on social media. And the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh my gosh, if he gets in other people's DMs, what are people going to think of me because they think that's me? Like
Mhm.
those are the fears and the pressure that we put on ourselves because we always want to be at our best and we've worked so hard to be at our best for something to come along and derail us. Um, but I also think that that's part of what makes entrepreneurs really good is because we never do get to that point of like, yeah, that's enough. But I love what Ed Milet talks about with it, which is, blissful dissatisfaction. And that is, yes, you can absolutely keep on chasing the next thing, but you have to find time to celebrate what you've accomplished. Right after COVID and getting that life-changing 4 months where I literally went from $8,000 a month to over $25,000 a month. I just remember being at that time and saying like, I'm working 3 hours on my business per week. My team is taken care of. My team's making more money than they ever have in their life. Our owners are happy. And wow, like this is really cool. I'm sitting here on a Monday driving around town, twiddling my thumbs, not knowing what to do next because I've done something really cool and I've
Mhm.
gotten to financial freedom. But I also said to myself, I better enjoy this now because I know that something's going to happen in a month that's either going to grab my attention because I'm like, I want that, or I'm going to have to solve a problem that I don't currently have right now. And that's all we do as entrepreneurs. We just solve problems, right? And so if we're always solving problems, then those are the things that also are on our mind before we go to bed and on our mind as soon as we wake up. And we have to find a way to, I don't like to use the word control, but just kind
Yeah.
of manage those things so that we can still have balance and to the best of our ability. I think it's really difficult to have balance, but I think I'm doing about as good of a job as I can.
Hey, if you are separating your personal phone and business phone, that's more balanced than I could say most of us probably have because that phone, if it goes off, it's like it's I you never know. It's like roulette for my phone. So I think that's really really important, like you said. And I like the blissful, what do you call it? The blissful uh,
Dissatisfaction.
dissatisfaction. So if you had to sum up everything, let's say 70 properties, you're doing coaching, you got a YouTube channel that's really successful and really well put together, by the way. To then also your podcast, is there an end goal for you as an entrepreneur? Do you have a certain kind of like Thanos moment where like, I could finally rest and I can watch the fields and look out at my creation or my work and feel satisfied and restful inside internally? What would you say that would be?
Yeah, I think it's a nice theory, right? Like we say we're working for something so that one day we can rest, but I really like how Tim Ferriss puts it in the 4 hour work week that like we have these quarterly or we have these times that we set aside for just enjoyment and just
Mhm.
having fun with the vacation on a regular basis so that we're refreshed to be able to go out there and continue because I don't really know that like One thing I recognize about myself is I do everything full on.
Mhm.
If I'm working, I'm not doing anything else. You can't distract me from that. If you do, you're only going to get 10% of my attention. And then if I'm binge watching TV, it's gonna probably happen for 8 hours that day. Like,
Yeah.
there's no part of me that's gonna go over to that office and start working like that. And so I find satisfaction in those moments of like, okay, Saturday and Sunday, we're gonna do this. I'm going to Hawaii, for 10 days with my wife in September, and I'm not gonna I might touch work, for an hour, Monday through Friday on those days. And so it's those moments for me that it's like, yeah, that's what fills my cup, but I'm still really hungry to go back and do the things and to feel progress. They say there's two things that people really get the most motivated by. One is being a part of something bigger than yourself, and two is growth. So if and I think that's a one to me, that's the number one reason why people typically pass away so quickly after retirement, is because
Yeah.
they were a part of something, now they're not, and they were growing, they were seeing progress in their work, and that's what they identified with. And now it's like the only thing that they're really trying to progress in is golf, and then they hurt their back, and they're like, well, now I can't even progress in golf, right?
Yeah.
So that's to me, like I don't really want to stop. I don't really want there to be a destination. I just want there to be those moments that I can allow myself to enjoy what I've done and give myself the permission to relax.
Yeah. It's all about the journey, not the destination. I like it.
Yes. Yeah.
You did send over some awesome social media links and places for people to check you out, but if you had one link that anyone listening or watching this video could go to, what would it be?
Just my website, fearlesskyle.com. You'll get taken to all of my stuff from there. And I mean, from the podcast, the YouTube channel, the Facebook page, the Instagram, it's all linked right there. So I just started fearlesskyle.com.
Perfect. Well, Kyle, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me on the podcast. Again, already felt close to you as a friend. Now I feel even closer, just through this conversation and getting to hear insight. I think if anyone listened to this and didn't get any value from it, I'd be super surprised. But just want to say, like, just really appreciative of your time and your friendship and what you're doing in the industry. I really appreciate it.
Hey, appreciate what you're doing for the industry too, man. It's awesome to see you growing and providing so much value for everyone.
1% a day is what they say, I think. 1% a day, that's all we need. So
There you
I
go.
love it. You heard it here first, Slick Talkers. Go ahead, check out everything in the show notes. Make sure that you follow, like, and subscribe to everything Fearless Kyle, Fearless Investor, and we'll see you all again next week.